Let's turn our attention to foreign policy. There's a lot happening today on this front. The Israeli Foreign Minister apparently had a heated phone call with Penny Wong this week. She has reiterated her call for a ceasefire as soon as possible in the face of suggestions by her Israeli counterpart that Australia's weakened its support of Israel in recent times. Is the Albanese government, though, in step with the vast majority of the democratic world in this position?
Well, I don't think the Albanese government is in step with our allies with the US, and nor with our partner in the Middle East being Israel. We know that Israel is a close friend of Australia, often sharing intelligence with us that has meant our ADF personnel are protected, and a lot of information comes out of the Middle East through Israel, and that is a relationship that's been damaged as a result of Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese's decision to play domestic politics on the floor of the United Nations. We need to get the hostages back home to Israel, out of Gaza, before there's any ceasefire. And Minister Wong's decision to somehow go it alone away from the US on these calls for ceasefire, irrespective of whether the hostages are released or not, doesn't have the coalition's support, doesn't have the support of the Jewish community here in Australia, and doesn't have the support of our closest ally in the United States. The thing that's actually going to get a ceasefire happening isn't Penny Wong's, dog whistling on the floor of the UN for the sake of Western Sydney. It's actually going to be President Trump saying that if it's not sorted out by the time he takes the Oval Office, there'll be all hell to pay. That's going to lead to the outcomes I think we're all wanting to see, which is the hostages back home safe and a resolution in the Middle East that doesn't favour one side over the other.
Well, a diplomatic source has been quoted by AFP suggesting that, in fact, Donald Trump's warning that there would be all hell to pay if the hostages haven't been released by January 20 when he has his inauguration, that has seen a softening of Hamas' position. And I guess you could add to that the weakening of Hezbollah and Iran recently, and of course Syria adds to that pressure on Hamas being more isolated right now. But as I said, a diplomatic source tells AFP that Trump's language has already shifted the dial, so to speak. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, this is what a strong leader does, and this is why we should be aligning ourselves with the United States, a friend of Israel, a true partner of Israel in the Middle East, instead of what Penny Wong as a foreign minister has been doing since October the 7th on the floor of the UN, which is playing domestic politics. Leadership requires you to say uncomfortable things that aren't necessarily popular in your domestic home patch to actually get the right outcome. And the right outcome is that the hostages are returned as the very bare minimum of any sort of proposed ceasefire, whereas our government has gone another way. So I think what it shows is strong leadership, decisive leadership, unwavering clarity on what needs to happen in order for ceasefire talks to actually have a foundation for going forward is exactly what the US President-elect has done, and it is in stark contrast to our own government, which is a shame.
Also, suggestions that a deal could be done by the end of the year. We will monitor that closely. Let's look at the issue out of Ukraine now. The government finally sending the ambassador back on a permanent basis, our embassy reopening in Kyiv. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been calling for that for a long time. Our allies and partners were back, from mid-22 onwards. We all stand with the courageous people of Ukraine in this war. We've been, obviously, as a country, supporting them with hardware and information. But getting that diplomatic presence on the ground, I think, is critical. We think it's obviously taken too long, but welcome it happening as of this week, which is fantastic.
Has the coalition, just finally before you go, have you got yourself tied in knots a bit over the promise to reduce power prices with the nuclear plan? Because at the announcement, Ted O'Brien said that hadn't been modelled, and now the coalition suggesting that it is going to reduce power prices by 44%. Which is it?
Well, Kieran, price is, absolutely tied to cost. So if something's going to cost you 44% less, i.e. your pathway to net zero, then the price of what's being produced at the end of the line will similarly go down. That is just a simple law of economics, and we know that our plan to get to net zero by 2050 and secure our energy supplies into next century will be 44% cheaper than Labor's plan. Labor's been trying to spruik their costings at 5 times less than the actual cost. And that's been the problem.
But if it was so simple,
I have
why didn't Ted
absolute
O'Brien just
confidence.
say that?
I have absolute confidence, but I have absolute confidence, Kieran, in the modelling and the work and analysis we've had out of Frontier Economics shows that our plan will be cheaper, and therefore the price of the energy being produced through that plan will also be lower than it will be under Labor.
Bridget McKenzie, thanks. We'll talk to you next year. Have a great Christmas and New Year. Appreciate it.
You too, mate.